Hello students, the theme of our lecture is language, national character, cultural identity.
The plan consists of language and cultural identity and language and national character. Language and cultural identity. Wyszybicka in her works offered and substantiated the hypothesis of the existence of universal cultural concepts of humanity, which it defines as the alphabet of mental atoms, semantic primitives. Due to this specific alphabet occurs the interlanguage communication in various forms. This assertion cannot be argued with, but her statement about the identity of thinking and perception in different ethnoses and her assertion of spiritual unity of mankind are rather disputable. Even an example of emotional perception of the world and its facts and events of all of us are witnesses not only in parallels, but also the sharp contrast, not allowing them to recognize the thesis about spiritual unity, neither of all mankind nor is separately taken contrary. Today's example is intercultural misunderstanding in former national republics of USSR and OC and West C in Germany. One nation but mentally a language relation differing under the influence of various recent ideologies and social systems. Other examples are the endless conflicts of Ireland and England, Palestine and Israel, Afghanistan, Chechnya, and etc. It is wrong to speak of spiritual unity of mankind because cultural concepts expressed not only in the language codes, but in memory of the historic extent of their existence. And this memory is fundamentally various at different language societies. Bachton supposed that only in terms of chronotopes, spatial and temporal surroundings of facts, events, speech, and etc., any statement may be understood. And chronotypes, as we know, are national specific. Therefore, Lotman underlines that if communicants are united only by the language code, but shared memory, their dialogue can be adequate. The value of the information will be in minimum because they will not have topics to speak about. An ideal example of such communicative situation is transfer of comments. A fact noticed by Lotman as semantic space of any culture and any language, a block whose borders are formed from sets of individual uses, can be used as one more proof of the inaccuracy of Wyszybicka's opinion about identity of ways of thinking and perception of the world. It means that language individuals in various ethnoses cannot equally reflect and interpret the world, which is not same at different ethnoses by means of the various language codes, which have been got mixed up in various memories of these ethnoses' history. Accordingly to the system of concept, cultural concepts cannot be only national and identical. Each ethnos has a large quantity of contextual concept as the birth of individuals. According to Lotman, semantic crossing is an explosion giving rise to new senses and new concepts which are quite often not possible to be expressed in other language codes. Therefore, each language individual is individual in his or her cultural concept, a language code, history, associations, implications, frames, myths, symbols, and etc. In addition, all these must be multiplied on a factor of the dynamism of the language space and a factor of the extreme complexity of the space of numerous correlated and not correlated, I of language individuals. The factor of the dynamism of human intelligence should not be also excluded. Even during the short period of time when we listen to the same record and read the same text several times, what changed is not that what is transferred, but the one who receives it. The structure of human intelligence is exclusively dynamical. It especially concerns word creation and a sphere of emotive nomination, which is unique not only semantically but also in creative unpredictability of designed contextual cultural concept. For example, sexual harassment in USA, red feathered about the Russian communist demonstrators during post-communist time, Japanese stuff, England, gifted intellectually disabled, Canada, and many others. It is necessary to mention serious distinction in cultural concepts of different ethnoses which are caused by such a component as religious faiths. Nations are not united but a confessional feature. This feature also influences mentalities of nations and their stylistics of verbal and nonverbal emotional behavior. Compare amnesty of Russian Christians and jihad of Muslims, as it is included into public consciousness of the nation and its mentality. Certainly, there are uncountable displays of an intercultural generality of world languages as the basis of mutual understanding of their speakers. Nevertheless, these displays are not enough for the recognition of a spiritual generality of mankind. Today's events and yesterday's national and autonomous republics of the USSR, like Baltic, the Czech Republic, and the Ukraine, and their relation to Russia hardly speak about the general spirituality of mankind. The ethnic function of language isolating one nation from another is known limits also speaks against Wyszybicka thesis. For example, lexical backgrounds at different lingual cultures never coincide, and their stylistics, register, situational backgrounds do not coincide in many cases either. Many foreign psychologists assumed for a long time that the human nature is identical everywhere on a globe. But as the facts testify, there are really deep psychological distinctions from culture to culture. The concentration of scientists' attention to the generality in human nature has led to ignoring rather serious distinctions, first of all in the sphere of human psychology, and especially between the West and the East. These distinctions explain the genesis of some specific emotional problems existing in one part of the world and absent or weakened in others. For example, agoraphobia, a fear to leave the dwelling, or anorexia, obsession of growing thin, as the emotional trends of the national level typical for the West, the practice of whom is observed only at inhabitants, both men and women, of Western Asia. For example, in 1995, splash in this national phenomena was observed in the southeast part of China. And even depression and schizophrenia have different symptoms in different cultures. Therefore, Wyszybicka can be more or less right when she proclaims the unity of human spirit, but only concerning the Western culture to which she belongs. Western and East, for example, Asian cultures strongly differ in education of children's emotions. Traditional cultural concepts of children's upbringing are directly opposite here. Compare individual self in America and family self, for example, emotional detachment or spiritual self, dispassionateness of American children from parents and not sharing of their emotions against emotional attachment of children of the East to parents, unified to an openness of emotional space, both nonverbal and verbal. Therefore, it is well known that interpersonal emotional mutual relations, including speech, in Asian countries more intimate and difficult than in the West. Language individuals of the Asian countries expect from each other a big degree of sensation, which is shown in the fact that everyone feels what happens in the soul of the speech partner without his or her verbal explication of the emotions. There is even such a concept as a cultural shock, which is known, for example, to many Russians who got to America or Japan for the first time and based on a misunderstanding of their cultural realities. I will give you only one example. In Asia, people can say absolutely various things about the same thing depending on a communicative situation, in particular on their mutual relations with a speech partner. For inhabitants of the West, it looks as hypocrisy, while for Asians, it is norm, the only correct behavior. As all of us, Homo sapiens and Homo locans experience in general the same emotions such as anger, fear, grief, pleasure, irritation, admiration, etc., it can be asserted that all of us in this respect are identical human beings. Only in a certain culture people understand and divide national frames more fully. But even this fact does not designate that all people, even one culture, feel and think identically, not speaking about people of different cultures. This generality of emotion does not also mean that popular stereotypes, stimulus of these and other emotional reactions represent an actual reality with an absolute correctness. Moreover, it does not mean that every individual representative of this or that culture knows his or her history and possesses its facts, ideas, and values, for example, can consciously verbalize them in corresponding communicative situations. I believe that the concrete culture is united by the general history and that each given culture realizes itself in a certain degree its difference from other cultures. It occurs because each culture has both its size and shape. Language and national character. We often think about this or that nation as a culture, for example, Russian or American, Culture in each group has a smaller subdivision. From this viewpoint, we speak about the East or the Western culture, and on the other hand, about the Chinese, Japanese, Indian, or about the French, Italian, German culture. Cross-cultural approach to emotional sphere of the language individual shows the various dominating emotions of the whole cultural community and its individuals determine the verbal feeling of the emotive functions of their language. The problem of language and culture synthesize problems language and history, language and society, language and nation and individual are firstly problems of ethno-linguistics. Some aspects of this problem are successfully worked out by socio, psycho, paralinguistics, and translation theory. In its relation to the all-mentioned branch of language science, ethno-linguistics acts as their synthesis. The thesis about direct influence of ethnos culture and concept comprising it on its language find acknowledgement both in lexicons, semantics, and grammar of language, and also in its phonetic field. From here, the distinction or difference of languages is explained by the distinction or difference of cultures, conceptual codes, and mental styles at various nations. This means that the statement about extra-national character of concepts so strongly occurring in logics, philosophy, and linguistics till now turns out to be the next naive mistake. After all, everybody knows that in one linguistic community, different language individuals have different mental styles caused by their individual codes of cultural concepts. This language mental distinction becomes essential at a level of various languages at the expense of national specific concepts which enter into their culture. Distinctions in national specificity of cultural concepts are especially certain, as it was already mentioned both other nations of the West and the East, whose language distinctions are also maximal, beginning from graphic ones. Actually, the East and West are two mental planets, Asia and Europe, on a globe with their codes of cultural concepts, causing opposite mental styles of nations inhabiting them. When Humboldt wrote about the internal form of language, according to Kapelenko, he underlined a national originality of motives of names in different languages. And it is also an argument in defense for the thesis about the national character of concepts. Certainly, there are also international and national concepts thanks to which cross-language communication is carried out. But the spirit of the nation and its consciousness are reflected in cultural concepts, motivating language consciousness, mental style, which is called national mentality. Therefore, on one hand, language is a means of thought expression and a means of its creation and registration. And as far as the different nations' cultural concepts, including gestures, frames, symbols, myths, ceremonies, rituals, and so on, are different from each other. Both their mentalities and language realizations of the last also differ. It is natural that these factors considerably influence an interpretation, understanding, and estimation of the same facts, events, texts by representatives of Europe and Asia, and further by various peoples in Europe and Asia. All those data allows us to recognize openly superior and worth statement that the worlds in which various beings live are separate worlds, but not one world using different languages. Language is not only lexicon and grammar, but also history and culture of the nation which speaks the language. Artificially imposing of the original language in the former national republics of the USSR was one of the arguments of justice of superior and worth opinion so long pursued by the Soviet ideology. The virtual world in these republics was consciously being built according to language norms of the Russian language, and deeper of the Russian culture, and even deeper of the Russian mentality. And unconsciously, and these words clashed all the time with the real one. For example, national spirit, its culture, and national mentality. Therefore, the spirit of the people and its own language has won in all former Soviet republics which did not accept in their national culture, national semantic code, and alien body, the Russian language as the language of national communication. The material facts of the Russian language did not become signs of the conceptual facts, national languages of the USSR. Russian could serve only as a means of international communication as English or German on the international scene, but never as a synchronous substitute of native languages of former citizens of the USSR. But language is also both a tool of culture and a tool of emotions. This diversity of interactions of language, culture, and emotions is demonstrated differently in different national and geographical spheres. At language semantics, there is not only a universal cultural component, but also an obligatory national unique one. Therefore, in cross-language, interlinguistic communication, there is a lingual cultural barrier leading to communicative hindrances as minimum or to communicative failures as maximum. In other words, cultural concepts being national on spirit can be untranslatable on other cultural planets, what explains language lacune, non-equivalent lexicon, as well as such arguments as lexical or semantic lacunes are the broad proof of it. This lacune is especially notable in the sphere of human emotions, both in their nomination and means of their expression. Language and cultures are also distinguished by their associated backgrounds, which lead to communicative hindrances and failures across language level as well. These factors are diverse both in language and in other areas. During the last decades, the interest to the research of emotions by different spheres of science considerably increased. At a level of everyday consciousness, each person understands what is meant when we speak about emotions. But till now, nobody has been able to give their certain scientific definition, as they represent rather many-sided phenomena with a set of functions. Taking into consideration their communicative function, it seems possible to offer the following working description of emotions as the specific form of the human relation to the reality and its linguistic expression, which is interpretation. Similarly, there is a considerable quantity of working definitions of such concept as culture. One of considerable elements of culture is often especially mentioned. Our thoughts, speech, acts, beliefs are also accompanied by emotions, explicitly or implicitly, meaningly or unconsciously, verbally or nonverbal. It was established a long time ago that people of all cultures or ethnicities are simultaneously linguistic animals. It means that speech, thoughts, and emotions are allied in the course of human communications, and that balance between ratio and emotio in human behavior is quite often broken, and emotio prevails. This thesis is fair in relation to the whole lingual cultural community and in relation to a separate language individual. As each of language individuals, irrespective of their cultural distinctions, experiences the same basic emotions, it generalizes people. Emotions are the central part which makes people of different cultures more or less similar to each other. But the same central part of the person makes each of us unique owing to an individual variation of basic and other emotions. As mental individuals, we express, transfer, hide all emotions by means of language in an especially specific way. This specificity is predetermined by an individual emotional trend and a national index of the given culture. If to compare America and Russia, on a national index, the first that is evident is an emotional stability in one country and an emotional disbalance in another. It is the first extra-linguistic contrast in the sphere of the emotional life of the Russians and the Americans, influencing on their speech behavior. Self-confident, indulgent, joyful intonations of Americans against angry, uncertain, sad, and so on at Russians. Bright cultural signs on Americans are pride and patriotism. The matter is that in foreign cultures, prosperous and attractive America has been considered for a long time as a country metaphor of the future life of many countries, and not without justification. The foreigner in the USA daily hears such broad phrases as, "This is America," "Only in America," "Made in America." Americans can be proud of many things: cleanliness and an abundance of free toilets, beautiful and countable roads and cars, supermarkets and malls, a real computerization, multi-channel and multi-program day and night TV, an abundance of universities and their availability to all levels of population, the concept of global education. As a whole, America is a country with a well-organized life. There almost everything is provided for satisfaction of needs, desires, and ambitions for people. By right, all over the world, America is called a country with unlimited possibilities, and for the reason, people from all corners of the globe, from different cultures, strive to get here to remain in it forever. America is a melting pot in which many cultures of the world are melted. Emotional feelings of pride and patriotism as national indexes of the USA are shown in verbal and in nonverbal symbols in all corners of this multinational country. Old Glory, the national flag flutters all year long, even on private residences. In Russia, it is excluded. Its symbol can be seen on caps, vests, underwear, footwear, plastic packages, and other consumer goods. Millions of copies of this flag can be met in many countries of the world. Americans are proud of the flag and honor it as the relic and its valid denomination. All glory comes from this. The pride of the country indicators is shown by Americans in a manner to speak confidently, resolutely, energetically, loudly, quickly, quite often, negligently in everyday speech. It is explained by an openness of the given lingual cultural society, a feeling of freedom and choice, legal knowledge, and security, freedom to be frank and full expression of himself as an individual independent of anybody. Each American realized the country achievements in liberation of individualities of citizens and knows that represents a subject of envy of the people of many countries in the world. The influence of America on other cultures through household subject with a trademark made in America is huge. Blue jeans, rock music, Hartford, General Motors, Chrysler. The trademark made in America as verbalized cultural concept symbolizes a better quality and technology to the whole world. Skyscrapers of Manhattan of unique architecture are one more pride of Americans. Language as a means of verbalization and translation of the USA's cultural concepts represents modification of British English. Owing to prestige of the country, American English actively expands into all lingual cultural communities, including the Russian one. A killer, a dealer, a barman, a manager, a label, a distributor, a management, and many other not speaking about youth's new slang. Gerla, Перенты, Безник, Fazer, and many others. The social and economic situation in Russia opened all ways to the American import, which has captivated with its advertising all mass media, streets, shops, and stalls of our cities, as well as the great Russian language. At present, along with Americanisms, the Russian mentality is experiencing an invasion of American cultural concepts. The broadest example is the concept of manager. This invasion of thought of language damage is a powerful argument of this thesis about the influence of economic and social standards on language fluctuations and changes and on a national emotional index. Not a long time ago, word combinations and image of the enemy and empire of evil were prevailing emotional symbols for Americans and Russians. These symbols were cultivated in mentalities of both lingual cultural societies by official ideology of the former governments of two countries. It has also generated such early international cultural concepts as Iron Curtain, Cold War, the Berlin Wall, and many others. The verbal pattern of these and similar to them cultural concept will forever keep emotive connotation of alienations, dangers, white threats, and semantics. Hatred and fear of each other were dominating emotions of both lingual cultures of these countries during these long years, and they have found their reflection in lexicons of Russians and American people, Call Me, Uncle Sam, The Yankee, and many others. The emotional index of the Russian people in comparison with American one never was stable. After the victory of Bolsheviks in 1917, emotions of enthusiasm, joy, and hope dominated for a short period of time, and it was reflected in a lexicon. We were the first who was dumped Tsarism and has established the power of workers and peasants. The sickle and a hammer became the state symbol. New cultural concepts which were completely based on ideology received verbalization and were introduced in everyday consciousness and speech. With their help, Bolshevists and later the communistic mode manipulated and supervised behavior, including emotional, of the whole society. By means of these Bolshevist ideological concepts, we were inspired that we were the first and the best in everything, that all what we had was the best, that we were the richest and the cleverest. The purpose of this mass official lie was to educate us to be proud of being a Soviet citizen. From time to time, this motion received grounds. This victory in a patriotic war, which was in 1945, the expansion of socialism to Europe, to Cuba, and the Far East, the start of the first space Sputnik satellite in 1967, the Russian word, the ambassador, cultural technical concept of the Soviet country, Sputnik, has flown forever in the lexicon structure of the English language. For the whole world, this event was a proof of great success of the nation and technology of the Soviet country, which caused rough emotions on the world scene, admiration mixed up with envy, surprise, and mistrust. and the emotional index of citizens of our country flat up. Pride mixed with triumph, happiness, cheerfulness, and a new inflow of enthusiasm. However, since the end of 60s and 70s, the vector of Russia's emotional index moves on a disappointment, disbelief, dissatisfaction. The social and economic reasons of it are known to everybody. Marx was right when he wrote that life defines consciousness. I will add that it defines ordinary and emotional consciousness too. The intonation and concept of the Soviet people to the political bureau of the Central Committee of the CPSU and the government become more open and dominating. Then there was a new party slide in the form of attractive emotional concept, perestroika, reorganization, glasnost, publicity, democracy. And as the satellite period, these cultural ideological concepts propped up the fallen emotional index of the country and served as the next injection of enthusiasm and hope. And lexicons of many languages, including English, enriched with the Russian words glasnost, perestroika, хорошо. But the period of this emotional lifting and of respectful relation to new cultural concepts was very short. Each next governmental life had a shorter life. And the above-named components, the emotional index of the country, were transferred to open hatred of the people to Gorbachev's hypocritical ideology, his game and noble concept, and his manipulation with noble characteristic features of the Russian people: patience, trust, endurance. In the Russian speech lexicon, there was an explosion of emotive nominations: communiki, communists, communiki, Democrats, demokraты, democracy, demokratura, reverie of democracy, разгул демократии, and many others, which verbalized new concepts to Russian culture, emotional reactions to перестроечные стимулы, reorganization stimulus. Such emotive derivatives as perestroika, boristroika, Gorbanomics, Gorby, with a broad negative evaluative connotation appear in American lexicon. Today's dominating emotions at a Russian national level are the psychological depression caused by the loss of national pride, panic fear for the future, pessimism, it will not be better anyway, Karasik, nostalgia to the past of the developed socialism. The American speech lexicon abounds with cliches. In 95%, the American smiles not because he's personally pleased to do it, but to make his speech partner feel pleased. The following emotive phrases serve to the same purpose. Have you a nice, good day, weekend? How are you? How is everything with you? How is life treating you? How are you doing? Relax, take care, take it easy, etc., which in most cases bear no semantic but only emotive connotation. Vigorous, cheerful, smiling high, which is used by everybody to greet each other when they meet, even during one day. The addressing to each other by the first name, even in official situations. Torn, Bill, Dick, endless, sorry, thank you, carry out the social function of creation of the image of the cheerful, joyful, happy with everything, and pleasant American. As one of my American interlocutors explained, I smile at somebody not because I'm pleased to see him, but because I know that my smile is pleasing him. It is good that with the help of such examples, adults naturally teach children pleasant words, words of love, support, which create comfort and interpersonal dialogue. One of the examples of cultural distinctions between Russian American spiritual values concern Easter. Easter is our general national holiday, but there are some distinctions. Unlike Russia, where the correct color of Easter eggs is considered to be red, in the USA it is dark blue. By this color, Russians symbolize sufferings, blood of the Christ, but Americans symbolize as rice, color of the sky. Thereby, spiritual distinctions and their national characters are shown. Pessimism of Russians and optimism of Americans. And the procedure of celebrating of this general for two nations holiday is absolutely different. For example, in such element as traditional rolling of Easter eggs by the president of the country on a lawn before the White House. We are very much different in it. A thing that especially amazes a linguist is their phonetic, lexical, grammatical negligence, the inaccurate treatment of language. The Americans' feelings of the superiority of the world has obviously a hypertrophied character. We remain a country irreplaceable for the rest of the world. From the point of view of advancement, to prosperity, freedom, and safety. Americans adore a car and the most part of their lives spent in it. It is their second house. They love it so much that, figuratively speaking, they would even go by car in an apartment from a TV to a toilet if it were possible. At least many Americans dream about it. They are impatient, cannot wait for success for a long time. They want it immediately. They are impatient to difficulties of different sort and do not love when somebody shares problems, difficulties, or have conversation about illnesses with them. One of the specificities of the USA slang culture is the concept of political correctness. The given cultural concept is the American variant of the language and social taboo and euphemism as a result of emotional reaction to separate verbal signs. A wandering example of the political correctness is the replacement of word nigger on the word black. And in the last year, even the word black already bears an offensive emotions and demands to be replaced in Afro-American. Hence, according to canons of the political correctness, poor people cannot be named poor. They are called socially underprivileged. Other examples they speak about intellectually detective in the following way. The destiny challenged their intellectual development, about homosexuals and lesbians, people of alternative sexual orientation. Several years ago, very fat people were spoken about as big, and today the political correctness demands the following language pattern of the sense, problem, and horizontal measurement. Thank you for your attention.